Okay, we're so happy to have back with us longtime friend, author, and parrot-wise person, Jenny Drummey. She's going to stay off video during her talk, and then at the end, she'll join us again for a Q&A. Jenny has lived with birds for a long time. She's an extremely good writer, and this topic is so important to all of us because it's much better that we live in a bite-free environment, right? That's the positive way to live with our birds. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny now. Jenny, you want to go ahead and share your screen? Forgot we meant to get that started earlier.
Here. All right. And let's view full screen. Where are we?
Down one more.
Full screen.
There you go.
There we go. And we say cancel. All right. Everybody.
Okay.
Are we good here?
Take it away, Jenny.
Excellent. Excellent. Hey guys, I'm so glad y'all joined us today on this hot and balmy Saturday.
I think you have to push. Oh, there you go. Sorry.
Do what?
You got it. Sorry.
Great. So I'm glad you guys could join us today on Saturday. Thank you for taking some time out of your weekend to learn about this really important topic. Unfortunately, biting is very common, but hopefully by the end of this class, you'll have lots of tools to make sure that it's less common in your life, if not completely eliminated. We are going to talk a little bit more about how you can order the book. This is based on a book that I wrote. Believe it or not, it was written in 2009, and I went through and read it again in preparation for this class. And I will tell you that everything in that book is absolutely still relevant today. Birds still got beaks and birds still bite. There's also additional information in there that's very helpful about developing a biting plan. And there's lots and lots of examples in there so you can understand what I'm talking about further. I have another book available through Phoenix Landing. It's a bigger book and it talks more in general about behavior. It's called Project Parrot. And that is a behavior guidebook for your bird. You write in it, you use it to exercises, you learn about behavior, and it's illustrated with lots of pretty pictures of birdies, which everybody always likes. So enough self-promotion, and let me just go ahead and start working through this. So what you don't know can hurt you. I have been bitten by the best birds ever. When I first got birds, my first bird was an African gray. Here's a picture of myself and her touching tongues. It only took one bite on the tongue before I realized that that was a very, very foolish thing to do, and also filthy and disgusting and weird. But you know, when we get birds, we do things and we don't think about it. So there you go, bites on tongues. Otherwise, here's my umbrella cockatoo Zeus, who I had for about 5 years. He was very good at running around on the floor and biting toes. I have scars on my arms from bites from him. I have a scar on my nose from a bite from him. So I have been bitten by many, many people. I mean, by many, many birds, and it is not pleasant. And it took a lot of reading and going to Phoenix Landing classes and learning from all kinds of different experts about ways to handle this particular problem. I just want you guys to think as you're going through this class. Think about the very last bite that you got, if it was in the last few days, in the last week, and I want you to maybe envision it for a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the whole class, and then we'll talk about if any of those, answers to some of those bite problems were not answered by the class that I'm giving. But I mean, everyone has been bitten at some point in the past. If you haven't, you're so lucky, or you probably have never taken your bird out of its cage, which is probably not something that we want. We want to, again, this class is to help you learn to avoid bites. And just to let you know, some of the people I've worked with in the past is I've taken the Living and Learning with Parrots class with Dr. Susan Friedman. I've been to Natural Encounters, Inc. down in Florida with Steve Martin twice. I've attended so many helpful seminars from Phoenix Landing that had people like Barbara Heidenreich in it, and lots of other famous behavior folks who really had all kinds of information that's very helpful. Plus, the people who are all Phoenix Landing volunteers, I learned so much from them. So it's a big, great community, and I've been able to learn a lot from all these folks. Let's see here. So this is my beloved Zoe. She's very interested in her own reflection, and one of the things you need to realize is that every time you get a bite, it has a purpose. It's communication, and the question is, are we listening? You want to think about the types of, one of the tools I'll talk about in a little while we call the bite analyzer, and I'll tell you about the kind of information to record when you get a bite, so you can kind of sort of understand a little bit better how things, why the bite is happening. And writing down this info can help you often, help you see how often you're getting bitten. So I encourage everyone to get their own little notebook and write it down in a journal so that you can keep track, and data always helps to do that. And we'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, so here's some things that people often say when they get bitten. And these are all kind of, he's just playing, love bite, he didn't mean it, he's mad at me, blah, blah, blah. He must not like red. We heard a lot about he doesn't like hats, he doesn't like this, he doesn't like that. Unfortunately, the problem is we can never, ever know what the real answer is, right? Because we can never get into our birds' heads. We can never understand what it is they're thinking. We can make guesses based on how they behave, but we can never really know. And if you put these particular answers up, he's just playing. You've taken that behavior, you've identified it, and you've perhaps put it in a little box and said, okay, it's just a play bite. When you really could be looking at it more closely and saying, well, wait a minute, why did this happen? We'll touch on a lot of these issues later as we go through here. So sometimes people think bites come standard with parrots. I don't believe that's the case. And there's so many reasons to learn to not get bitten. They make socialization difficult. I mean, vets and pet sitters are going to have a hard time dealing with them. And if you have to rehome your parrot, which if we're lucky and our birds live long enough, many of us will have to do that for whatever reason. Many people, dedicated caregivers, cannot take care of their birds anymore. It's very hard to find a home for a bird that bites. Here's Zeus, the old foot chaser. Bites can be dangerous for the parrot as well. If your bird bites you, your relationship is dominated by fear. Now, fear makes you a big step back. The way that birds see the world, from what we can tell, it's on a different time scale than we do. Plants are very slow, right? They grow slowly. If you watch time video of a plant, you're like, oh my God, it's doing so much, but it's so slow. Birds are very fast, not only because they're prey animals, but just because of the way they process information, right? So if your relationship is dominated by fear, the way you interact with that bird, you are going to be flinchy. You're going to be having jerky movements. You're not going to be confident. So there will be lots and lots of things that you'll do that can make the bird themselves get uncomfortable with you. Birds are very empathic, right? They're trained to look at their flock mates and say, what is that bird doing? What is that bird doing? Is that bird nervous? Am I nervous? Are you nervous? You're afraid of me? Well, I'm afraid of you. So bites are dangerous for the bird because they engender fear between you. And it's very difficult to have a good relationship when you're afraid of them. So like all behavior, and I mean all behavior, why birds bite is very simple. It's a behavior that allows the bird to access something he wants or to avoid something he doesn't want. And this is true for everything you can observe a parrot doing, whether it's flying or walking or drinking or eating or playing. But biting, just like any other kind of behavior, has the same purpose. All behavior has a function. Bite triggers. So here are some things that we pretty much can identify in general categories. Things that set up the situation for a bird to bite. Now, birds always choose. We don't cause them to bite. They choose to respond to things in situations. An object, person, or situation that causes the bird to exhibit body language. That's a mouthful, but we'll talk more about this in a little while. Territoriality around the cage, caregiver distraction, where we're not paying attention to what we need to do, unwanted attention or too much attention, when people want to snuggle and pet and hug and rub up against a bird and they just don't want it. And caregiver's body language, again, when we're moving we're not moving confidently around the bird, when we're afraid, we often react in ways that causes them to have some fear. So as you're working through to try to solve this problem, it's really important to think about bites as simply communication. They are not to be taken personally. I know that they are very painful, sometimes emotionally. They're certainly painful physically, and they may make us, like I said, be afraid or not trust or want to avoid them. But if you just think of it as the exclamation mark at the end of the parent sentence, I am uncomfortable with this situation, and they're just communicating. That way that you won't have the same sorts of emotional tie. And it'll be hard, but you can do it. The other thing I would advise is if you have had a well-socialized bird that never bit you and did start biting, take that bird to a qualified avian vet to make sure there's nothing wrong. You know, if the bird is sick or has some kind of an injury that you can't see or is in pain for some reason, bites could be a reaction. So a change in behavior that causes biting definitely demands a visit with the vet. And also, any bird can learn to bite, right? We teach them to bite. In the wild, the times that birds bite when they're fighting over nests. That's pretty much the only time. Nests are coveted holes in trees, cavities in trees. Birds, parrots don't generally build their own. They have to go and find them, right? So they are highly valuable. Birds bite each other, defending those nests and acquiring those nests. But besides that, they really don't do that. But we teach them through how we interact with them, through what we do, through what we don't do to bite. And if your bird's beak is overgrown, of course, take him to a vet. That's another reason to visit the vet. The beak has a very specific look to it and may need to get groomed. It could also indicate other problems. So if you have an overgrown beak, be sure to get that checked out. Okay, so we're going to start with some biting solutions that don't work. And some of these don't work. Well, we'll explain and we'll go into them. But there's a very simple way to sort of test, is a solution going to work or not? And I just call it the trust test. I'm sure there's many other names for it, but basically is the solution builds trust if the bird can choose to participate. If the bird is forced to comply, it will likely destroy trust. So what does that mean? If someone says to you, you know, if you really want to get that bird to stop biting you, just go in there and grab him up and hold his head up so he can't, no, right? Clearly that's not something to choose. The bird is not choosing to engage. So having a solution that allows the bird to choose to come, to participate with you is going to be the best way to solve the problem. Now, choosing is great. Well, how in the world do you get them to choose? You have to find out what motivates your bird. So here's the thing about motivation. And you guys probably know this if you've worked with birds for any amount of time. One week, it's going to be one thing. The next week, it might be something else. So establishing a really broad spectrum of motivators is also very, very powerful. Sometimes it'll be food. Sometimes it'll be access to a favorite toy. Sometimes it'll be access to a favorite person. Sometimes it's just drama, singing, dancing, jumping around, making a lot of noise. Sometimes it's a mirror. When we've trained different birds to landing in step-up classes, we've had to be very creative and figure out different ways to motivate birds to learn. One bird was its Tyonis, and that bird, all that bird wanted was access to a ringing bell. So if it did something and then it got to ring the bell, it was so excited. And it was great because you could train forever because he doesn't get full from ringing the bell, right? Another one I remember we had a neglectus that would do anything for just a couple of squirts of juice, little eyedropper, 2 or 3 drops of juice. Perfect. Squirt in the juice, give him the thing. Way to go. I know I remember Anne training a macaw who loved to look in a mirror. You know, these are all different ways that they were motivated to learn. And the thing is, they choose, they show you what they want their reward is. So we'll talk about in a second how to figure out what that is. Now, here are some other things that people sometimes advise you to do, or that you sometimes might do just out of natural, just as a natural reaction to stop the biting, and it really isn't necessarily good. So yelling at the bird, isolation or timeout, using gloves, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so let me talk about each of these a little bit more. So punishment has a very specific meaning in the world of behavior. And I don't want to get too much into behavior science because it could be, it's not hard, but it's just a little bit more than this class is really meant to do. But in the world of behavior science, punishment is the addition or removal of a stimulus that decreases the occurrence of the behavior, right? For us, punishment is often something that happens from a place of anger, frustration, and again, it causes you to react in a certain way around your bird that they pick up on it, and they will get angry, or they will get frustrated. We don't know. We can't read their minds, but they pick up on our body language, and they will have an interaction with us like that. punishment does not teach the bird what to do instead of biting, right? One of the goals of this class is you've got to teach the parrot what to do, not what not to do. It's very hard to do that. Yelling at the bird, yelling at a bird and saying no or ouch, that's probably exciting to them, frankly. That's probably a big joy because that's what they do to each other in the wild. I'm on this tree and you're a mile and a half over there. Are you still alive? I'm still alive. Hooray, we're still alive. So yelling at the bird often is a lot of drama. And if it does frighten them, then it's not going to build any trust, right? They're going to be afraid. Isolation or timeout. Here's another one that people often do. They get a bite and they get the bird, maybe it's on their hand, or maybe they're playing with it, and they pick the bird. You're going back in your cage. They pick the bird up. They walk the bird across the room or through multiple rooms, stick the bird in the cage, close the door, maybe cover it. All of these particular actions have happened from the time when the bite happened. And behavior is really driven by the absolutely immediate consequence of what happened right after the behavior happened, right? So all of these things that happened between the bite and you putting the bird in the cage, that bird will not in any way connect you putting the bird in the cage with that bite. It will just be, oh, I'm going back in the cage. So gloves, sometimes people use gloves. I have to be honest with you, my cockatoo's toenails are so sharp right now that I am actually wearing a glove that you use so you don't cut your hands with when you're working with sharp knives. And I don't like to do that, but I'm getting her toenails done on Tuesday. So then everything will be fine. But usually they communicate a lot with their feet. They might grab your hand, they might lean back or forward, the slightest change in pressure. So listening to a bird's footnotes are really important, and using gloves kind of dulls that. Plus, if you walk around with a bird on your hand that has wearing gloves, everyone around you is gonna be like, ooh, that bird's vicious. That bird's like an eagle or a hawk or something, right? So tolerating bites is a natural behavior. Sometimes people think, that's just part of having a bird, right? But again, as I said earlier, they're really not natural unless they're defending a nest cavity. So it's not really important for that. And flooding. So flooding is another sort of sciencey type term. But just to give you an example briefly, say that you've got a bird that's in the cage and you want the bird to come out between 10 and 10:15 in the morning because you have a break, and that's when you want to spend some time with them, and that's all the only time you have for 2 hours during the day, whatever. So you go into the cage and you try to get the bird to step up, and the bird clearly doesn't want to step up. You chase the bird around the cage a little bit with your hand. Maybe you go in and grab a towel. Okay, you're coming out now, and you pull that bird out. Great. So the bird's out of the cage. Fine, whatever. The next day, maybe the bird will run away some more, and you practice the same exercise. Grab him with a towel, bring him out of the cage. Eventually, after 3, 4, 5, maybe a week of this, that bird will probably stop running away and will probably just stand there and let you pick it up with the towel. The bird has been flooded. It's learned that it can do nothing to choose to perform this behavior, that you are going to force it to do it. And when you do something like this, when you flood the animal, basically you're setting yourself up for a bite at any second, because the frustration level in that animal, again, we can't know for sure, but that's not trust building. It is trust destroying. The best way to solve a problem like that will be to teach the bird to come out of its cage on cue. If you really want to have it come out at 10:15, start working with it to come out on cue whenever you present a certain treat that it only gets when it leaves the cage or whatever. But we can work on more specific information like that later. Okay, you need to go to the right. You need to go to the right. I'm not sure what's going on. There we go. So the most important thing to do when you get bitten is something other than what you were doing when you got the bite. If you think about that for a minute, the whole point there is, there's the old saw, insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. Part of what we'll talk about in a minute with the bite analyzer is every time you get a bite, you need to try to determine what you think the antecedent to that behavior was, because you don't want to do that again. There's lots to learn every time you get a bite, but it's absolutely vital that you stop what you're doing and drop it and roll out a completely different type of behavior, or type of interaction with the bird. So bites can happen very quickly, and we want to try to eliminate them in the first place. We want to try to get ahead of them. We want to try to change the environment or change the situation, change how we interact with them. Because like I said, sometimes they happen so fast, you could be shocked by them. I remember one time very clearly, one of my old Quakers, who I no longer have, unfortunately, he's passed away, but he bit me so hard that I was shocked and I flicked my hand and the bird flew right off my hand. Like it was just instantaneous. I couldn't help it. It was instinctual. So it's really important that you remove the situation that remove the possibility that the bird will bite you at all. Okay, so we're going to talk about some questions of why does your bird bite? So here's a couple tools we're going to talk about in this section. One is called the bite analyzer, and one is called the biteometer. So the bite analyzer is a series of questions, and they're included in the book. And you use your biting journal, and every time you get a bite, every time you sit down afterwards, after you've recovered, whatever, and you ask a series of questions to help you determine what could possibly have caused this. Your responses can help you determine what the bite trigger is and what to change. It's really important to track this information to help you solve the problem, because every bird is unique, and to solve the biting problem, you need to consider that parrot's situation at that time. So there are multiple approaches, and only some of these will work for your bird, but there's all kinds of ways to look at the questions and solve them. So some of the questions we have here that I like to sort of get people thinking about when you're doing bite analyzer is the date and time of the bite, how long since the last bite, where were you when you got bitten, where on your body did the bird bite you, where was the bird, if she was on you, where was she, could you see her, if you were able to see the bird, describe her body language, and on and on and on. There's about 15 to 20 questions that you can ask that can kind of help you go back through the problem and try to analyze what could have caused it. So that's number one. Then there's another one that you have in here. It's called the biteometer. And it's a tool that helps you minimize bites as you calibrate your ability. You identify behaviors and body language associated with high bite capability and low bite probability. So we know that birds communicate through body language. If we know anything, the way that they're going to tell us how they feel or think, we can't read their minds, so we can't know for sure, but we can look at how their body language is. This is my African gray when she was very, very young. And unfortunately, she doesn't look this beautiful now, but she was a very happy bird, but she loves my husband. She's not crazy about me. When I look at her body language right here, she's playful. She was probably messing about with that toy to the right. She's got her beak slightly open. Her eye is a certain shape. Her feathers are, you look at all these different things and you come to understand what certain behaviors are going to be positive for interaction and which sorts of behaviors say back off. So here's an example of the biteometer. And the whole purpose of that particular exercise is that you sit down and observe your bird for 5 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day. And you write down every kind of behavior that you can see that bird doing, whether it's stretching their wings, preening, eating, chewing a foot, playing with a toy. And you write down also whether you think that the bird is going to bite you if you were going to interact with that bird, or if they're not going to bite you when you're going to act with them. The lower the biteometer reading, the less likely it is that that bird is going to bite. And that's the body language that you want to look for when you're looking to interact with the bird. And this is just a way to really get you thinking about how the bird looks when you believe that it's comfortable and that it's going to interact with you positively. So here's some bite triggers that we talked about a little bit earlier, and I'd like to go into them in a little bit more detail. An object, person, or situation that cause your bird to exhibit body language we associate with fear or aggression. Now, the reason I'm using all that kind of strange language is that, again, we cannot read their minds. We can think the bird is afraid, the bird is aggressive, the bird is hormonal, the bird is this, that, and the other, but we really can't know. But we can look at their behavior and at their body language and try to understand when would be a good time to interact and when would not be such a good time to interact. Birds who are highly fearful or highly aggressive at that moment are more likely to bite you. Your goal is to recognize whatever body language your parrot displays that you associate with fear or aggression, and this body language is a clear indicator that a bite is possible. You avoid physical interaction with the parrot during this time. It's simple but crucial to reducing or eliminating bites. And remember, of course, like I said, fear and aggression are what we call labels. We think we know what they're doing, but the most easiest way to think about it is this is the time when I can interact, this is the time when I can't. So, and the same body language can indicate fear or aggression lots of times when we see it. I would say it's pretty easy to have some basic rules about biting. If the bird is tired, if the bird is sleeping, eating, or sick, it is more likely a bite will occur if you force that bird to interact. Now, I keep going on about labels. This is part of the reason that we need to think about things in terms of not his emotional state or her emotional state, but what the parrot is doing, the body language, the noise, the activity level. This is my little cue ball. Gosh, he was the cutest Quaker I had. He's the first one that passed away, unfortunately. He was only 8 years old, and he came from a pet store, and he had atherosclerosis. The problem is lots and lots of Quakers get this. It's a common problem. But anyway, yeah, you definitely want to focus on what the parrot is doing, not what you think they're doing. When you see your bird exhibiting certain behaviors, whether this is driven by fear or aggression, isn't important. The goal is to take these behaviors as clues that a bite may be imminent. Your goal is to change behaviors that you've chalked up to fear or aggression, and then reduce or eliminate that biting that is associated with these behaviors. Okay, so ways to avoid bites related to fear or aggression. You minimize your exposures. These compared to the object versus your reward and trying behavior. Okay, so when you have the kinds of things that cause this kind of behavior, clearly, if the bird's afraid of the vacuum cleaner, maybe you can put the bird in another room when you're vacuuming. You know, if the bird doesn't like people with hats on, tell people to take the hats off when they walk in. I mean, clearly you can tell some things are true. You can also desensitize a bird to a situation that makes it uncomfortable, and desensitization is on your parrot's schedule and not your own. So if you had, say, went out and bought a big, beautiful, fancy toy that cost you $50 and you want that bird to love that toy, and you show that bird that toy, and that bird runs to the back of the cage and says, "Get you." You don't just go, "Well, I spent $50 on this, so you're getting it anyway." You don't hang it up in the bird's cage, right? You might have it across the room from you. You might even show it to them every couple days, standing 10 feet away, and rub it on your face and then take it back out again. Desensitization is on their time. You do it slowly. And then you can also reward an alternative behavior. For example, if you say you open the bird's cage and the bird is standing on a perch, and every time you open the cage, it lunges. Well, that's an indication that we might say it's aggressive, we might say it's fearful, we might say it's territorial, whatever. But if you wanted to, say, stop the bird from doing the lunging behavior, what you could do instead is put standing erect and tall or stretching a wing on cue. They can't lunge at the same time as they're stretching a wing or standing up tall. So you pick something that they can't do at the same time as the behavior that you want to stop. Yeah. Territoriality is another common problem around cages. I have a great little tiny canary wing parakeet, and he is so well. He's my vet at Stalls. They all love him. Every time I bring him in, he gets every 2 months he goes in for a beak grooming because his mandibles aren't aligned, and in mandible, you know, his beak, his top, lower, and upper beak aren't aligned. So anyway, all the vets and vet techs like, "Oh yay, it's Scooby." I mean, the last time I took him in, my vet was literally kissing this bird on the head. He's that loved. But if you get anywhere near his cage, especially when I'm changing food bowls and he's inside it, I have to be very careful and very quick. He'll try to bite you. This is his place, right? Some birds get very territorial around their cages. Some species have a reputation, but any bird can learn this behavior, and it's okay. That's their home. We don't have to stick our hand up in their face in their cages. The one way to solve this problem is to get the bird outside of the cage and move them away safely and then interact with them. You can use all kinds of things, a perch, a basket handle. If for a big bird, you might want to roll an office chair up to the open door, have the bird climb onto the office chair, roll it away. But the point is trying to get the bird not trying to get the bird away from the cage and interacting with them. A territoriality is a behavior that they can have, and it doesn't need to be trained out of them. It is how they want to live. Sometimes if we have to service the cage, you have to clean or something, and the bird may be so territorial that it's dangerous. You can have a friend come over and offer them a treat on the opposite side of the cage, or you could put a treat cup on both sides of the cage, and stick a treat that takes a little while for it to eat in the opposite side of the cage so you can service it safely. And there's all kinds of ways that you can do it where you're engaging with the bird, but you're not having them be territorial because it's an alternative behavior, right? They can't be territorial around their cage if they're out of their cage, right? Or they can't be attacking you on one side of the cage if they're enjoying a walnut on the other side. So here's a picture of myself from many years ago, and caretaker distraction. This is a very common problem. Sometimes, you might have your bird on your shoulder, you're hanging out with your bird and get a phone call, and you don't even think. You just pick up and start talking on the phone, and you're not paying attention to anything when you're talking on the phone. You don't see changes in the bird's body language, that they're bored, that something startles them, that they're whatever kind of label you want to stick on it. Caretaker distraction is a big problem with getting bitten. I think a bird on the hand is definitely worth slowing down for. So if you're doing something that engages you entirely so that you cannot, be mindful of where your bird is and what your bird is doing, just put the bird down, go put it on a play stand, put it on the play gym, put it in its cage. You don't need to have the bird on your head. Unwanted attention is another bite trigger. Unwanted attention is often when people, they really want to treat their birds like dogs and cats and pet them and snuggle with them. And to be honest, that's not always a positive behavior for many, many reasons. Most of the time we associate birds snuggling with birds with their mates. And we do not want to encourage birds to think of us as their mates because we are not their mates. And when they do think of us as our mates, it can cause problems for other family members. It can cause problems for ourselves. It can cause all kinds of issues. So a limited touch is probably the best way to think about it. And usually on the head, nothing below the neck. And, also another thing is another bite trigger is your caregiver body language, how, where, and how quickly you approach. Anne has a series of videos that we did together at the landing at one point where we show if you go in too quickly, if you go in too slowly, if you go in just right. It's like a three bears approach. And you'll know when you watch the bird's reaction that you have to be confident, not too fast. You just have to be you have to be mindful of the speed at which they absorb information, again, because they're prey animals and they have a much wider, think of their eyes on the side of their heads, right? They have a much wider range of vision than we do. They're looking up, they're looking to the front, they're looking almost to the back and all the way around. And their eyes are binocular in the front, right? They have binocular vision around where their beak ends, but on the sides of their head, they have monocular vision for each eye, right? So they're getting so much more information than we are because our heads are just two eyeballs in the front looking out because we're predators, right? We're staring straight ahead. So they see things not only much more quickly, but they also perceive things differently than we do just from their physical structure of their eyes. So when we move and when we interact with a bird, we may think that we're being, careful, but the bird will tell us. Watch the bird's body language. They get to tell us what they think, how they think, and what's going on. All-purpose solutions. Okay, so we talked about some other things that current bite triggers, but there's also some other things that you can do that I think will help to reduce or eliminate bites altogether. Personal space, respect personal space. So when we say don't force your bird to comply with what you want to do, I would say like in most cases, you probably want to approach the bird, give it I don't know, a foot to 6 inches if you're offering it a treat so the bird can come to you and get the treat from you. You don't have to cram it up in their face, right? If you want to do a step up, if your bird steps up successfully, You might want to come up and put your hand on a perch that's stable and let the bird choose to come to your hand, presented, 6 inches to a foot away. Letting the bird choose to participate is always going to be a lot more careful, a lot more successful, because you can see the bird's body language as they start coming to you. They can come, passes the trust test, right? It allows them to participate. Also, it's really, you have to let your schedule kind of go out the window, right? Birds don't necessarily do things on the same time that we want them to. And you can certainly train them to do certain things and align your goals. So you cue a step up, great. You can definitely get it reliable. If the bird comes on your hand, fantastic, you want to move it. Or you cue a step up to a perch or a basket handle or whatever to move them around, that's fine. But the whole point of training, and unfortunately, we don't have any time to really talk a lot about training in this course, but that is really the best way that you're going to establish a lot of trust. But placing your bird's trust in you as the most important thing. Whenever you interact, if you choose, when you're interacting with them, make sure that you're trying to build trust. Always build trust, not destroy it. Motivation and consistency. Reward your bird with something of high value. The high value is to them. We may think they want a peanut every day for the rest of their lives, but sometimes you can switch it up. I got to be honest with you. Pine nuts are the common currency in my bird room. Everybody will do just about anything for a pine nut, but they get very small pieces of them because pine nuts are super fatty, kind of expensive, but not more, just super, super fatty. But they all let me know that is exactly what they're going to work for. And for some reason, it's been a consistent favorite for months now. Everybody's been pretty happy with pine nuts. But I wouldn't be surprised if, at some point they're like, no, walnut, almond, a little bit of dried fruit. Some birds like yogurt, some birds like all kinds of stuff, whatever it is that they are willing to work for. And another all-purpose solution forever is always ignore behavior you don't want to see. If they're being too noisy, you don't react. If they're being destructive to something, clearly move the bird, but don't give them a lot of drama. If you get lunged at, just walk away, and never, ever, ever laugh when a parrot bites someone. I've seen, birds learn, especially birds in pet shops, unfortunately, will learn that there's a lot of fun in scaring people. Sometimes someone will come up to the cage, maybe they'll lean their head down and that person will be like, oh, look, he wants to scratch. And then he'll bang his beak against the bars, or he'll make a lot of noise. And then it's almost like you can see the bird. And we don't know. I can't read their minds again. But, training that kind of behavior is it's setting the bird up for a life of cage-bound life. So never, ever, ever laugh when a bird bites someone. That's not a good thing. So understanding your expectations, that's another all-purpose solution. A lot of times we call birds, birds are kids or feathered kids. Well, put your kids in a cage, man. Birds are not your kids. They're not your soulmates. They're just wild, barely domesticated, in lots of cases, still very wild animals that we have somehow welcomed into our homes, and they demand respect. And trying to insist push a human relationship on them is it's too much. It's never going to work. Understanding your relationship and your expectations, and limiting physical contact. To be honest, touching the bird, rubbing the bird, petting the bird, doing all the stuff that we like to do with our dogs and cats, as we've learned many, many times, can encourage this mating behavior. And especially, oh man, cockatoos, they are just ready to vibrate like crazy and pant and have a great time. But it encourages all kinds of, it's just not a good relationship to have. So another all-purpose solution is patience and flexibility. Bites can result when a caregiver is rushed or eager for a bird to do something right away. Parrots are not on your schedule. They do not have to be. I think if you ever have trouble, all you have to do is stop and walk away for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. If the bird is too anxious, like crazy, hyped up, nuts, whatever, and you think you're about to get a bite, there's no reason to interact. All you have to do is turn around and walk away. It's the simplest solution in the world. But you have to be flexible. You have to say the parrot is not on your schedule. If you don't have, for example, if you get your bird out in the morning before you're going to go off to work or get your kids to school or whatever you do in the morning, and then so that means the bird has to go back in its cage at a certain time. Unless that bird is extraordinarily well trained to go back in its cage immediately, and you don't have to spend, don't let them out when it has limited time like that. Why? Because it's more stressful to chase that bird around the house trying to catch it and put it back in its cage. Instead, when you have time for training, then you train the step up into the cage very reliably. Once the bird does that, and there's all kinds of ways to train that, but once the bird does that, that is the time that you can then let the bird out and you can get them back in reliably. So the whole point is you can be patient and flexible, but make sure that if you're trying to get the bird to do something, get it trained up, get the behavior trained up when you have time. And this is, again, the simplest all-purpose solution is walking away and coming back in 5 minutes. There's no reason a bird has to do anything at any particular time unless the house is on fire. And then, of course, we're all in trouble. That's my friend Zoe, admiring her beautiful self in the mirror. Another one is personal space. Present objects your hand or a slight distance so your bird can choose to approach. And I can't tell you how important it is to do this, especially with birds that are, a little less hand friendly. Lots of times, to be honest, birds don't seem to like hands. And that's okay. They don't have to step on your hand. They could step onto your sleeve. You could put your sleeve over your hand. They can step onto a perch, a basket handle, a rolling chair. There's a small travel cage, a small play gym, anything. There is no reason a bird absolutely has to step up onto your hand, and you can't. And in my opinion, it is not important that a bird steps up onto the hand. It's more important that you can get the bird to do things that you want them to do, and that they do them with trust. And so I have like African gray I've been showing throughout here. Henry, she's 24. I've had her for all of her life. She would never step on my hand in a million years. I have a PVC perch. I show it to her. She nearly steps up and she's ready to go. It is just as easy as anything. And I don't care if my husband comes in the room, she's on his shoulder in a hot second and she does not want to come off. And he's really has so much less interaction with her than I do. And to me, that's completely fine. If I pushed trying to get that bird onto my hand, I have no doubt that she would eventually be very frustrated with me, whatever, label, whatever, and she would bite me. So in other words, I'm very patient and flexible with her. So this is another one that I think is very all-purpose. Be here now. Like I said, caregiver distraction can cause a lot of problems. But I think if you look at the time that you spend with your bird as really you time that you can enjoy and you're right there in the present moment, I think you'll be a lot more attentive to their body language, and you'll be a lot less likely to get bitten because you'll be there. You'll be, and I think you'll have a much more intimate and trusting relationship too. This is the picture of my little Quaker Nero. He's the last Quaker standing. I still have him. He's probably in his late 20s at this point. And he is the picture that I used as the painting for my Project Parent book. So I spent an afternoon, he had a very fun afternoon flying upstairs in my in my living room where he got these tiny little cookie pieces. And he was just like, okay, sure, I'll fly again. One other cookie here, fly. That's that picture. So there he is with his little cookie in his mouth and enjoying the heck out of the time. So then there are other few things I just want to talk about briefly. Situational solutions. All these things, by the way, everything I've talked about here, we go into a lot more detail in the book, but the book isn't long. It's about 70 pages and it's a pretty quick read. So I think, if you're interested in any of this stuff and you want to learn more, it's also available in Kindle, a little bit cheaper. Some people like Kindles, but anyway. So when your bird is introduced into your home, so you're bringing in a new bird, one of the things that we always tell people is, when you bring that bird into the home, think about how much time you're really going to have realistically after the honeymoon period is over. A lot of times when we get a new animal in the house, we're so excited and you have it out for 10 hours a day and everyone's playing with it. A couple months later, life settled in, everything is back to the way things are. And the bird gets out maybe 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day or however much time it gets. It's really important that you set up the bird for success from the very start. And also, when your bird is first introduced into the home, it's absolutely vital that you do something similar to that bite-ometer exercise that I talked about earlier, where you spend a whole lot of time learning how that bird communicates, learning its body language, watching what its bite triggers are before you ever attempt to get it on you or step up in any way. A step up should be, in my opinion, a step up on the hand should be one of the last behaviors you ever train. I don't think it's safe to do that until you know how that bird reacts to things and what they do when they see certain things, or how they stand, how their tail flares, how the shape of their eye, whatever. So uh, don't, be mindful when you bring them in that you're learning, and you're both learning each other, frankly. So go slow, go very, very slow when you first introduce the bird. And it isn't a race. There's no purpose to making it fast. You want to let the bird choose to interact with you. You can have the bird come out and, like I said, roll it away from the cage on a rolling chair or a basket or whatever, however you want to carry it around. Let it have play area, play stand away from the cage. Watch how it acts there. Learn the body language outside of the cage, because those are probably going to be a little bit different. In the cage, the bird may be, like we said, territorial. It may feel more comfortable in the cage. It just depends on that bird. Every bird is, as they say, in living and learning with parrots, a study of one. So when the bird steps up, now this, like I said, I think the step up should be among the last behaviors if you train some that you want to train. And part of the reason is because that we as humans don't necessarily instinctually understand how birds work in their bodies. Birds physically work. Birds don't like to step down, number one. So if you're ever going to have a bird step up, you literally have to hold your hand a little bit higher than the perch, or than them, maybe about 2/3 down the belly, whatever. They don't like to step down. It's difficult for them to do so. The other thing is your hand has to be very steady. So it may be useful when you're doing a step up to have your hand balanced on something like another perch or the back of a chair or something. The other thing is you want to keep that bird's beak right up, geared towards, or facing high up, so it can't lean down. So if that bird steps up onto your hand, you shove a nut into that bird's beak, and then you turn your hand around, lower it a little bit to the perch so the bird can step up onto that perch. And I have an illustration of this whole sequence in Project Parrot. So there are certain ways that you can make a step up as they're learning it much easier for them and not get bitten. And if you do get bitten when you do a step up, back off. Don't go back in and try to do it again, right? It's silly to try to do the same thing over again. Take a look at what you did. Sometimes people can videotape, everybody has cameras on their phones, set up a camera and watch you interacting with your bird. Film it, see what it looks like. How does the bird's body language look? Because sometimes when we're looking right at the bird, maybe we'll miss the tail if they have a long tail. Maybe we'll miss the wings. I don't know. So it's helpful to have film to see too. Now, birds that are flighted. If a bird in your house is flighted and it flies at people or other animals and bites them, I say it is time to trim that bird's flight feathers, work with training to get them to stop with whatever we're calling the aggression, figure out what that trigger is, and let them grow out again and give them flight later. But allowing a bird to continue to fly around your house and bite people or other animals is so extraordinarily dangerous for so many reasons. And as much as all my birds are flighted, as much as I love to give them flight, if they have a problem, at one point my Pyonis, as a matter of fact, we were staying at the landing because I was getting the floors in my house redone, and I had to have all the birds out of the house. And my Pyonis at this point was so horny that I avoided touching her because she was so huff, 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 puff, 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 that Pyonis crazy sound. So at one point, I'm standing in the educational room upstairs. We've been to the landing. I had my back to her. I was servicing some other cage, and she literally flew across the room and landed on the back of my neck and just bit the back of my neck. I was like, what? This had never happened before. I took her calmly, put her back in her cage. I brought her back up when I went to see my vet. I said, look, let's try to get her some Deslorin. Let's try to chill her out, and let's give her a wing trim. So we did that, chilled her out. After her horny phase ended, and maybe a month or two, whether she's flighted again, she's perfectly fine. But I would not have felt comfortable if the bird was flying around and attacking me or anyone else. Now, birds on shoulders. This is another one. Everybody loves a bird on the shoulder. It is just so intimate. It's so fun. But I would say to you that if your bird bites you, when they're on your shoulder, that bird is not a shoulder bird. It's just simply not that way. Some birds can tolerate being up there, and they never have a problem. You like to have them up there. That's fine. But the problem is when they're on your shoulder, you can't see their body language. You can't necessarily tell. And it's really easy to just get distracted with what you're doing because the bird is right there. And maybe you're folding laundry and you flip the towel out, bam, and it freaks the bird out and it bites your ear. maybe I've heard people walk out of their house with the bird on their shoulder. They just forget it's there. So be very mindful. A bird on the shoulder is so close to your face. It's just, it's a very special privilege. It's like driving. I always say when people start to, when older folks start to screw up driving, they say, well, driving is a privilege, man. It is not a right. The bird on your shoulder is a privilege. It is not a right. And that's for both of you, frankly. The bird doesn't need to be there. It's lovely if it can tolerate it and you don't have problems, but it's very, very difficult to tolerate, having a bird on your shoulder by you. And sometimes when people put birds on their shoulders, they kind of forget it and they just kind of walk around. And, maybe if it does happen, one suggestion I have is, look, say the bird's on your shoulder, been on there for like 15, 20 minutes. Maybe they're getting bored. You could try taking them off. And if they try to get on again, maybe have them on there for 2 minutes. And if they don't bite, take them off, put them on the perch, put them somewhere else. Have a time limit on it if you want to. But frankly, if a bird has bitten me, I don't want them on my shoulders again. That is pretty much it. I have a lot more information in the book, like I said, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I know I probably talk pretty fast. I tend to do that when I'm presenting for many reasons. But anyway, I really appreciate your attention. I hope you learned something, and I hope that it gave you some ideas about how to solve some biting problems that you might have in your home.
Thank you, Jenny.
And I will turn on my video.
We'll join each other for a little Q&A. How about that?
Come on, Mr. Man.
While we're doing that, before I forget, if you're an IAABC member listening today or in the future, your code words are no bites. Just email us at contact@phoenixlanding.org and we'll give you the code to get your CEU. So anyway, thank you, Jenny. You have a way with words, as always. You know how to get to the heart of the matter, which I love, and all those delicious metaphors you use to make it so relatable. It makes learning easier and manageable. And I can't say enough about both of her books. They are easy reads, practical, operational information. So you're not like wading through a ton of concepts and you're like, but what do I do? So she's really good at giving you specific information. And I'm glad you brought up flying at the end. I know we have a couple people here today who are dealing with that issue because we want our birds to fly, right? If we can, for exercise.
But you know what? Here's the thing. You got to realize this. If you trim their flight feathers, it's not like they're never going to fly again, right? Birds molt twice, sometimes 3 times a year. It's a time if you're having trouble with flighted birds that are flying and biting people, it's really it's an opportunity to say, hey, I need to train more with this bird so I can have a more positive relationship, and so that the bird knows what to do. And then after you've trained them and you pick your behaviors, the bird's feathers will fly back out. They can go fly again. They're not going to be grounded for life,
Right. And the benefit of preventing that pattern from developing is really important. So a lot of people here today or in the future may not know that there's something called a skinny clip, which I really like. It's just taking a few of the feathers. Your vet should learn or knows how to do it. And it just goes down the shaft. So it doesn't actually cut the feather shaft itself. And that allows the bird to still glide very gracefully towards the ground without actually landing on somebody's shoulder or biting them or whatever. So
there is nothing to be, it is not a failure on anyone's part if you have to renew flight for a little while. He's talking about long-term success and not being afraid. I mean, if I had an animal that was, if you had a pit bull that could fly, you sure as hell would cut those wings off, wouldn't you? I mean, you don't want to be attacked by anything, and you also don't want to be afraid of the bird. And like you said, and you don't want it to become a pattern, because if the bird learns, oh, if I bite, I get this. If I bite, I get this. Biting then becomes the quick pattern of communication. It's like the default. Oh, I want this bite. Got it.
Right. And it's so hard not to react. So that reaction is going to give some kind of reinforcement to that behavior. Yeah. Yeah. If somebody wanted to know, and I know this has been a topic for years in the behavior world, but a bird bites you. And what does it mean when you say, ow, or you shake your arm or whatever. I mean, is that a good thing or not good thing? Tell us your thoughts.
Well, I think the problem there is that we can't know what the bird is going to get from that, but I imagine any loud noise is probably fun for them. They like drama, they like loud noises. You know what's
Right,
interesting I learned fairly recently is birds can't go deaf. With
right.
us, we have a little, well, for the lack of a better word, little tiny hairs in our ears that do not regenerate once they are damaged. Parrots can regenerate those, and so they never go deaf. So they're screaming their head off, and you think, why doesn't he deafen himself? Because they can't go deaf.
Oh,
So ow and excitement, shaking the hand is definitely going to be like a trust. They're going to lose trust because you're going to think,
yep,
oh, you're wobbly, you're not stable. I'm not going to land on you, or
right,
I'm going to have to grab you with my beak to hold you steady so that I can then really be sure you're okay. So
right.
those are two things that, regardless of what they're communicating, the behavior that caused that bite, you ought to look at that behavior and get ahead of that behavior so you don't have the bite happen in the first place.
Like maybe not put them on your hand anymore, or for a lot,
Exactly.
quite a while, find a different transportation system. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you don't start a pattern. And I think that might go also apply to birds on the floor, right? We have a question about birds on
Oh yeah, birds on oh gosh. I mean, that's a lot of
cockatoos, right? They love to run
love
around
birds
and
on the
chase your
floor. Oh my gosh.
toes.
Yep.
Yep.
No open toe, like just like when you go into the no open toed shoes. Oh man, that is scary. Yeah, no birds on the floor. Well, birds on the floor are bad for a number of reasons. Number one, because they do get excited and they love to chase toes. But number two is people can step on them. Big dogs can, other animals in the house can get them. You can not see where they are and pull a chair out. I mean, it's being on the floor, unless it's an extraordinary, like, unless it's like the
So
board.
dangerous.
It's
Yeah.
very dangerous. So a lot of times in those situations, you can create these, well, I don't know, your foraging tables probably work this way, where the actual tabletop is wider and extends over the legs, because a lot of times how do birds get down on the floor? They go and they go
Yeah.
to the edge and they slide down.
Yeah.
So people will create like a big place where birds can play, or play. A lot of times play gyms are made that way. The
Right.
bottom of the gym extends over the legs. Putting them up
Or
on
a bird can just hop down on the floor, especially if they're cockatoos and get
on
around.
the
Yeah.
yep. Well, on the cage, you can put your seed guards up, and you can actually get. I mean, it's kind of kooky, but seed guards, they kind of angle out.
Yeah.
You could
They're a
get some
pain.
pieces of yeah, I know, but if you want to let that bird out, but you don't want him to go down under
Yeah.
the cage floor, you can put the seed guards up and extend those with any.
More of a floor guard than a seed guard. Right.
You can definitely keep them from doing it. And plus, if you give them a place like a play gym or a tree or even a hanging gym where there's a lot more fun stuff to do, it might actually be, they might prefer it than the idea of just being able to run around on the ground. I mean, but then there are also birds, frankly, like grays and some cockatoos. Why are they down on the ground? Because that's where they are in the wild. They're
Yeah.
foraging on the ground. So it's
Yeah.
like a natural behavior, but we don't want them
Right.
foraging in our homes on the ground.
Right.
So
Right.
unfortunately, we have to discourage that natural behavior.
And
That's
it always goes back to the best way to solve a problem is to prevent the problem, right? So if you know that that's going to be a problem, better to get ahead of it. Yeah. And Jenny's talking about a foraging table. We'll deal with some of that. We'll actually make one during our retreat next year. But there are great ways to have birds stay busy with lots of little things to do in a place that you consider acceptable, so they don't get into trouble elsewhere. Yeah. Can you talk more about what to do when a bird has a favorite person and lunges or tries to bite everybody else?
Yeah, that's something that's covered in my book for sure. It's very common.
Yeah.
And it has to do a lot with what we're encouraging. The person who's the favorite person, sometimes you can't even help. It just loves you. Birds are mysterious, right? They just, for some reason, they see somebody and it's love at first sight, or in some cases, hate at first sight. But
Like your husband. All the birds love your husband. Yeah.
just, I don't know
He's
why.
got birdie
I don't
pheromones.
know what he sees in them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there are some things that you can do that can, you first of all, you want to realize that you definitely want to discourage any sort of behavior that's lunging, biting related. I would say for that, the person that is the favorite of the bird should definitely be training, and should be thinking of different things that they can train the bird to do that they can't do, like I mentioned earlier, like lunging. like going to a particular perch, stationing on a perch in the cage, and that every time that that bird sees that person they don't like, they give that cue, and that bird goes stations on the perch in the cage. They can't lunge when they're biting. Another thing you can do is you can call this thing I call the toll booth, where you set up a treat cup inside of the bird's cage, and outside of the room, wherever the bird's cage is in, you have a little basket or bowl, whatever, of the absolute favoriteest things ever. And the only people who give that bird that treat are those people that he doesn't like. So say whatever pine nuts, like my guys, I would never give them pine nuts if they were my favorite. All the people that he doesn't like, every time you walk through that room, you just pick up the nut as you're going through, drop it in the cup, just keep right on walking. Every time you drop a treat in that cup and the bird starts to associate people with something they like, I think it will help a lot to go a long way in making that less aggressive.
Or maybe that person just needs to stay 10 feet away, always and forever, and that's okay too.
It could be, absolutely, it could be. But I mean, there should,
You can build a
say
relationship.
we should try to encourage the parent. They don't have to have a wonderful relationship with every single person, but they shouldn't be aggressive. We shouldn't see, we should try to discourage that kind of behavior, because clearly it's some kind of distress in the bird. We don't know what it is. We don't know, angry, hormonal, fear. We don't know. But there's something about that situation, and we want to try to teach them to do something else, right?
Yeah, and maybe sometimes it has to do with the species too. You know, if birds who are naturally in large flocks in the wild, they are more adept at adjusting to more than one person or a family. But birds like macaws or Amazons that tend to be just solitary pair for the most part, if they're a bonded pair, they're never going to be totally open to building too many other relationships. It's just nature kicks in, right? And we got to just recognize that. I know, living with a bonded pair of macaws, I know my place, which is not close. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. Somebody wants to know about when they have a pet sitter, the macaw lunges at them. I can only say to this person, get a wider cage that has a divider so your pet sitter doesn't have to be in their personal space. That would be my solution to that problem. But
Oh, right. Yeah, we have these double macaw cages, and that you can actually stick a divider in there.
right.
I mean, if the pet sitter can also grab whatever the bird, if it's a walnut, because usually macaws love walnuts, something big and meaty,
Mouth occupier.
they can throw it into
Yeah.
a bowl across the way, and then as the bird is dealing with that, you go and service however you have to service the cage.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to, the bird doesn't have to love the pet sitter. It just has to be safe enough so the pet sitter can change the water
Yeah,
and food and all that stuff.
exactly.
Maybe they get a special toy that they only get when you're gone, and this is the thing that takes them forever to do. And you put it on the outside of the cage, on the opposite side of what you want to do, so they can still get to it, but you don't
Right.
have to actually go into it. I mean, and I can understand that is a little bit concerning, because it would be scary, for some people
Right.
not used to it. But I mean, pet sitters have to deal with dogs and cats and all kinds of animals that may not like them. So it's not, it's kind of
Right.
part of the
We
job.
want the bird to feel safe, and we want the person to feel like they can actually get away and not worry. And yeah, sometimes just a wider cage can make a difference in the bird's life, period. But especially when you have to have somebody else help. That would be my advice. They make 64-inch wide and 80-inch wide double wide cages with dividers. So maybe the listener would like to, we can certainly help with more information on that too. So I also wanted to throw out, one of the things I learned after many years of not knowing what to do is using a spoon to deliver a treat. That's one way for the bird and myself to feel more comfortable, that I'm not putting my hand in a way that makes the bird feel threatened or my hand to be at risk. So why not? I remember we trained somebody one time. Kevin was training one of his families, and they actually put the walnut in a skillet with a really long handle, so that there was absolutely no possibility that the bird would be able to bite and start a pattern. So yeah, be creative, right? Let's see, we have quite a few other. My Quaker gets upset and bites when I pick up objects like TV remote. I'm guessing that's a caregiver distraction issue. Thanks for listening, Pauline, to all Jenny's wise words. But what do you think about that, Jenny?
So I'm assuming that the Quaker is on them and they go over and they pick up the remote, or maybe they're sitting down, the Quaker's on them, they lean over, pick up the remote, right?
That might, yeah, she doesn't
Um,
say, but that's probably very possible.
yeah. I think
Close enough to bite, clearly. Yeah.
right. I mean, I think it could be if you're going to pick up stuff and you think it's a reliable situation that the bird bites, we don't know why, but you could come up with some uh, treat or toy that you could hand to the bird prior to picking up your remote, right? You
Mhm.
could
Mouth occupier
you can
again.
have a little
Yeah.
bowl of their favorite treats or their favorite toys. Reach
Mhm.
over, hand it to the bird, go grab your remote, go on with your life, right? Putting something in there. You could also just, how many times do you have to change your channel? You put him over on his play stand, change your channel, go get him, bring him back.
Mhm.
Putting him somewhere that he can't get to you while you have to grab things, and have everything you need, maybe
Very
tuck
accessible.
it under your right
Yeah.
leg and pull it out secretly. I don't know. But there's all kinds of things you can try that he can't get to you, and why he would bite. The question is, maybe you have to think about it a little bit more closely, like, what is it that he's doing? Is he really biting every time you pick something up? Or is he biting when you move your arm? Is he biting
Mhm.
because you're leaning a certain way? Is he biting because
You move too fast. Yeah.
moving too fast is another one. Absolutely. Try to break the behavior down a little bit more and look at them. And you may find if you film you and they can put your phone or whoever you have across the room so you can see yourself and the bird, maybe watch for 5 minutes, film, and see what happens when you pick things up. And maybe you'll notice something in his body language. And he'll even start to react to something if you start leaning towards something. It can give you all kinds of insight if you just film it and watch it too. So
Thanks for the reminder on that. Filming is such a great thing. And I remember another thing you taught me one time was if you have certain kinds of phones with slow motion video,
you can
you
slow
can
mo.
see
Yep,
so much
yep.
detail. It's incredible. And we don't even realize we're doing things sometimes. I know it took me years to realize I was moving way too fast. And birds see better, hear better than we do. And so they're built to get away from anything threatening. And I was just moving too fast.
Well, and they have to move fast, right? Or they'll be eaten.
Yeah,
That's the whole problem with being a prey animal. You have to
exactly.
move quickly
For
to stay
survival.
alive.
Right, exactly. In fact, somebody said earlier in the chat something about they thought their bird was biting because it didn't have a mate anymore. And I'm not sure that we can make that, uh, I'm not sure we can say that that's the case. We don't know, first of all, but I'm not sure a bird would bite out of that scenario. There are probably other things going on there.
Yeah, I think you could maybe try to analyze a little bit more closely. And we didn't talk about functional assessments,
Right.
antecedent behavior and consequence, but I think if you do a little research, functional assessments are very common tools. It's a very simple tool to sort of help
One
you
of our recordings is the
going on.
ABCs of
There you
behavior.
go.
So, I encourage
Go look at
everybody, just go to our past event recordings page and go down to the bottom of the behavior and you can
that.
learn all about the ABCs, antecedent behavior consequence. That's a great tool to have in your toolbox for every interaction and relationship in your life, birds and other. Yeah.
Maybe take a little bit closer look instead of assuming it's because of something that happened
Right.
in the
You'll
past.
never
Look
know
what's
that
going on right now in front of
right
you.
now, this millisecond. Exactly. Exactly. I loved your phrase, listening to your bird's footnotes. That's a new one. That was very clever, because how you feel their feet is so informative. Oh my gosh, that was a great. And look at your Zoe there with her charming model stick.
Yes.
Yeah,
This is my Zoe. She's still around. I've had Zoe for 18 years, and she
yeah, through
is
thick and
still
thin, and
really fun.
hopefully many more decades to come, of course. Let's see. I think we have one more question. I want to make sure. Well, Danielle's got quite a few questions here, but she talks about a bird who, when it's in a certain room, likes one person and aggressive, a label to everybody else, but when they go to a different part of the house, that behavior doesn't happen. So something clearly is going on there that's more than just the people, I would think.
It's kind of interesting, though. I mean, it's an
Mhm.
interesting way to think about things. Kind
Yeah,
of consider, I mean, there's all kinds of things to consider, like level of light, plants, things that are hanging
right.
from the ceiling. You know, what kind of light bulbs do you use, right? LEDs versus compact fluorescents. I mean, some of these things, the frequency of light actually flashes because birds, again, perceive things differently. Maybe there's something going on outside of one room, like a neighbor dog bark. And who knows? But it's interesting because the behavior is so predictable. It's interesting to consider. Write down every single difference you can think about of the different rooms, every single one. I mean, there's got to be probably 50. Who knows? And each one of those things could be contributing to the problem. It sounds like you want to think about the behavior that you want to see. Then if you can isolate what's different between the two rooms and change that thing in the room where the bird is aggressive, that would be a wonderful place. It would open it up. You can also just don't take the bird in the room where it's aggressive.
Just don't go there. Exactly. That's all, again, the best solution. Yeah. Well, that's one reason I like your Project Parrot book, is because it's a workbook. It's meant for you to operationalize what's going on. And if anybody invests in it, one of my suggestions is that you make copies of those pages. You can write in the book if you want to, but if you want to be able to use it, because, behavior changes. And those of us who live with birds for decades, they're one way 1 year, and 2 years later, life happens. So things change, as does behavior. Not only.
I mean, the one thing I think everybody should take away from this is, if you don't train with your bird, if you don't, work with your bird in that way, I would highly encourage you to look into training with your parrot, because it really helps you to communicate better. It helps you to understand each other better. It helps you to learn what to look for and how not to get bitten. It teaches you how to live successfully.
Right.
How it is. I mean, I could never move my gray around and train her to step onto a perch.
Right. Yeah. Well, target training is always a great way to start. And just FYI, everybody, Education Day, as we're calling it, in November, the first session that morning, I think, is Cassie's joining us again to talk about target training. And she has a really great target training class that I wish we could put online for everybody to have always and forever. But she really has that class down to really good information.
I mean, a lot of these things are, even target training, all these things are everywhere. There's lots of great resources.
Yeah.
And I mean, all you have to do, if you're looking at something and you say, well, is this really true? Because everybody has their opinion and blah, blah, blah. Just ask, is this solution going to build trust with my bird or destroy trust? Can they choose to participate, or am I forcing them to participate? Am I using something to motivate them to do it, or am I saying you have to do this now?
Right. Are they coming towards me in a positive way or going away from me in a negative way? So what do you do when a bird purposely tends to come towards you for the purpose of biting? What would you do in that situation? I mean, clearly it's a pattern that's going to just get worse. So we got to do something about it.
If the bird, I guess it kind of depends on where it's happening or when it's happening. I mean, I would walk away from any bird that's coming to attack me. I wouldn't stand there and take it. But I mean, I think it would also be important to figure out,
is it in a certain location? Is there somebody else in the room?
What time of day has it eaten? Who else is in the room? I mean, there's all kinds of questions. Again, that the bite analyzer type of questions, where you're thinking about all the different nuances of how the behavior occurs, where it occurs, when it occurs, what's happening. And filming, you could cut, for example, if you're in the room, at what distance are you from the bird where it starts to come towards you? Right. So say you're 10 feet away and the bird starts to come towards you. Well, stop at 9 feet and just wait. And as soon as the bird reacts, let it sit there for a minute, maybe take one more step. If it lunges, step back.
Is it a personal space issue? In other words,
exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Is it always this way, or is it just because it's near its cage or near its play gym or near its favorite person or whatever?
And then maybe worst case, so the bird's not cage bound, resort to the skinny wing clip approach briefly, just to do a reset or at least prevent a problem from getting worse. Yeah. Oh, all right. Somebody wants to know if they can get handouts. I guess that depends on what you want to do about that, Jenny.
Oh, I'm happy to send these pictures. I mean, it's got lovely pictures in it and big words, so I'm happy to.
Okay, well, Bonnie will work that out.
So I'll send it to you, Anne, and you can share with whoever you want it.
Okay. And then, of course, we're going to put this recording, if you agree, up online so that always and forever. We've got some biting advice going on because that's an issue that will never cease to be an issue while birds live in our homes.
Now, I tell you, honest to God, guys, I can't tell you the last time I got a bite, and I feel so fortunate But it's only because after 24 years of living with birds, I mean, I did a lot of work to learn how to do it right and figured out how to make
Yeah.
it work, you know? And to be honest, I'll tell you something. This is this kind of a sad, but kind of a good story. Cockatoo Zeus that I mentioned at the start. I had him for 5 years. He was a male. He was so rambunctious.
Mm.
He was so hormonal, whatever he was. I had to relinquish him to Phoenix Landing. He was not working in my home. I was getting bitten. I had scars. It was terrible.
We trained and trained and
We did.
trained.
I even came down to Ann's house and
Yep. I fostered him for a while to reset. Yep.
oh my God, it was so heartbreaking. I will tell you, I was so
Yep.
sad. 4 months later, I got Zoe. Zoe has been a dream bird. She is wonderful. She has never bitten ever. She has never bitten ever. And why? Because every time I wanted to do something, I make sure that she's choosing to do it. So if she wants to go in her cage, all I put some pine nuts in there. Oh, I'm ready to go. Pine nuts work with little Scooby too. Right into the cage. Bam, ready to go. If she doesn't want
Right.
to go in, okay, stand up on the door. We'll try again in 5 minutes. And it is
Of
so
course, female versus male can play
female versus
into,
male. Absolutely.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
temperament has a lot to do with it. But also I did not know when I first got that umbrella. Zeus was my second bird. And I did not know what I was doing. I just didn't. So after having read a lot, gone to all these classes, learned from all these incredibly super smart people, I had a lot of tools in the toolbox to work with. So, you know, just
but you also were brave enough and wise enough to know that it wasn't a good fit, and why keep trying to make something work that wouldn't work. And now Zeus is at a home where
oh
he
my
he
God,
loves this guy. They travel the country,
Zeus has
but
more
I think
exciting life than any of us, I'll tell you.
I think it's worth people understanding that sometimes nature kicks in and we can't fight. We should never try to fight nature. They are closer to nature than we'll ever remember to be. And the males of some species just have a very different approach to life, and we have to respect that. So
Yeah.
it makes it harder for us to find homes, unfortunately. But when they do find it, we just hope it
Works.
lasts a really long time. Yeah.
And to be honest, that relinquishment is a really is a one relinquishing a bird that you can no longer care for is a really wonderful thing to do. Instead
Yes.
of tossing it out into the world or leaving it in its cage for years or sending it to us.
Selling it or putting it on Craigslist,
Exactly.
crazy thing.
Exactly. If
Right.
you have the patience to find a good place like Phoenix Landing and
Right.
you need to relinquish your bird, it's okay. It's very painful.
Yeah. No guilt
I,
ever.
I
Right.
remember for years I was the adoption coordinator and people would be crying on my shoulder when they gave those birds up. They were
Yeah.
so sad. But you know what? They went on to better lives.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
sometimes
okay.
people wait way too long and the bird pays the price, and that's not fair. That's not the
Yeah.
point of any of
It's
us
okay.
caring about
It's
our
okay to give
birds.
up. It's okay to admit defeat because you're not admitting defeat. You're moving on. You're letting the bird move on to its next home.
Right.
If we're lucky, these birds
Quality of life.
live
Right.
many years. So,
Right. Right. Would you have any parting wisdom for us in your wise ways?
oh God, what did they say to you earlier? If we get old, we're lucky, right? So,
Oh, yes. I love that
so
phrase.
think about how, as we all, because none of us are getting younger, as I always say.
Right.
Think about your parents. My parents are all pretty geriatric at this point too. I mean, I've had them for
Mhm.
25 years. Some of them they're still around, and I'm so happy to have them. But think about your bird because in the end, if you have a bird and you have to relinquish them because you can't care for them anymore because you get old, is that bird going to be successful in its next home, or is it going to be able to find a home it bites? So
Mm.
even if you can't change the problem behavior for any other reason than to guarantee you that your parrot has a successful future, please try to change biting at
Right.
any means necessary,
Right.
as it will make everything better for you and for your bird.
It's not a pattern a bird should ever try to develop.
Nope.
And
Mm-mm.
and we can affect that. We're the ones that let it happen. So we have to take responsibility to prevent it. That's right. So the best way to solve a problem is to prevent it. Don't forget that, guys. So it's always my first answer to problems. So
Thank you so
well,
much for your attention. I hope you guys learned something today. And
it's an honor to call you our friend
thank
professionally and
you.
personally, Jenny. And
Thank you.
just keep writing because you're a very wise and insightful writer and have a way with words. So
Thank you. I
and
appreciate
thanks everybody for being here. I'm sure Jenny would be glad to help you anytime as well, but we'll have this recording up. I'm traveling, so it won't be up as soon as we usually do, but this will be up on our recordings page. And, I always learn something, and I've known Jenny and the way she says things for a long, long time, but I've already taken away things today. So never stop learning. Refresher courses are in your best interest. You want to live a long time with your birds in a positive way. So learning is the best way to do that for their sake and yours. So thank you, everybody, for
Thanks,
being.
guys. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.